The bell wakes you before dawn. It is not a bright, cheerful sound, but a low and heavy note, echoing down the stone corridors like a voice pulled from the earth itself. You stir from a thin mattress stuffed with straw, the rough blanket sliding from your shoulders. Tonight, we'll step inside the stone walls of the medieval monastery, where silence ruled, prayers rose at impossible hours, and life was bound by strict discipline. Along the way, we'll wander into the wider world of medieval faith, from visionary abbesses and illuminated manuscripts to pilgrims, relics, and the soaring cathedrals that still stand today. Before we begin, make yourself comfortable. If you enjoy these late-night journeys, consider subscribing. And if you'd like, leave a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is in your part of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a soft fan for that steady hum in the background. Settle in, and let's begin. Cold air hits your skin as soon as you wake up, sharper than you expected. The monastery does not keep fires for warmth in the sleeping quarters. Comfort, you realize, is not part of this life. You sit up slowly, your joints stiff from the hardness of the bed. Your cell is small, barely more than a cell in truth. A narrow cot, a wooden stool, a shelf with a book chained to it, and a single crucifix fixed to the wall. The air smells faintly of damp stone and old wax. It is utterly silent, except for the shuffle of sandals outside your door. Other monks are already rising, moving into the hallway in obedient quiet. You dress quickly in your habit, the robe of coarse wool that scratches against your skin. There is no softness in it, no luxury. Even the fabric feels like a lesson in humility, reminding you with every step that the body is to be kept low, obedient, disciplined. You fasten it at the waist and pull the hood forward. The corridor is dim. A single lantern sways in the draught, sending long shadows across the walls. You fall into line with the others, each man's face pale and unreadable. No one greets you. The rule of silence keeps their lips still. It presses against you like another wall, heavier than stone, harder than wool. In this place, even words belong not to you, but to God. The bell tolls again, softer now, pulling you toward the chapel. You walk with the others through the cloister, the open courtyard surrounded by arched walkways. The grass glistens faintly under moonlight, but you do not linger. The air bites at your cheeks. The sandals on your feet slap against the worn stone path, a rhythm in step with the others. The chapel looms ahead, its doorway swallowing you into darkness. Inside, only a few lamps burn, their flames quivering in the draught. Shadows stretch tall against the walls, bending over carved wooden stalls where each monk takes his place. You lower yourself onto the bench, hands folded, head bowed. Then the chanting begins. It rises slowly, like mist from a valley. Low notes at first, then higher, winding together in unison. The sound fills the chamber, vibrating in the timber beams, sinking into the stone floor beneath your feet. Gregorian chant. Its purpose is to carry prayer upward, to knit voices into a single offering. But at this hour, with your stomach empty and your eyelids heavy, it feels endless. You mouth the words, syllable by syllable, Latin phrases whose weight you cannot fully grasp. You sing because it is required, because it is the first prayer of the day, held at 3 in the morning, the hour monks call matins. The chant lasts long, longer than you expect, and by the end your throat feels dry. There is no applause, no pause for reflection. Simply silence again, and the slow filing out into the darkness. You walk back through the cloister, the cold air sharper now that you've sat in the chapel's stillness. The horizon shows the faintest glimmer of grey. Dawn is approaching, but sleep is forbidden. You have prayed, but the day has only just begun. Inside the refectory, the dining hall, Benches stretch along heavy wooden tables. A loaf of bread sits on the board, dark and rough. A pitcher of water glistens in the lamplight. This is breakfast, though the word feels too generous. You are given a slice of bread, hard at the edges, dense at the center, with only water to soften it. There is no butter, no honey, no spice. Monks do not eat for pleasure. They eat to live and to keep their minds clear of indulgence. As you chew the dry bread, a reader stands at the end of the hall. His voice carries softly through the space, reading aloud from a sacred text. The words blend with the scrape of knives against bread and the occasional cough. No one speaks. Conversation is forbidden at meals. Instead, you listen whether you wish to or not to the slow, measured reading. You wonder if the bread tastes any different to the man reciting, or if his hunger numbs him the way it does you. When the bread is finished and the water swallowed, you rise again. The sun is just touching the cloister walls now, pale and thin. There is no rest. Work begins. You are sent to the gardens first. The soil is cold in your hands, damp with dew. You kneel among rows of herbs and vegetables, pulling weeds, turning earth, planting seeds. The monastery must feed itself after all. Each monk has a duty, and yours is to dig, to sow, to tend the ground. Your hands ache quickly, unused to this labor, but you cannot stop. Discipline demands obedience. Hours pass in this way. The sun climbs higher, warming your back, but sweat drips down your brow and mixes with the soil on your palms. Birds chatter above, free and bright, but their song only makes the silence among the monks more noticeable. Each man works without chatter, bent low, absorbed in rhythm. By midday the bell calls again. Another prayer. You brush soil from your hands and return to the chapel. The chanting begins once more, voices weaving into the same melodies as before. The repetition feels endless, as if time itself has slowed to the pace of liturgy. The meal after prayer is simple again, a bowl of thin pottage, made from beans or peas, perhaps with a shred of onion, if the season allows. It is bland but warm. The reader's voice drones over it, reciting another passage of scripture. You eat in silence, eyes lowered, spoon scraping softly against the wooden bowl. Then, back to labor. Perhaps today you are sent to the scriptorium. The room smells of ink and parchment. Long wooden desks stretch beneath narrow windows that let in cold light. Here, monks copy books by hand, one careful letter at a time. The quill scratches softly against the page, the sound steady and hypnotic. Mistakes are punished with penance. Hours slip by unnoticed in this slow, meticulous work. Your back aches, your eyes strain, but the page must be completed. Knowledge, after all, must be preserved, and it is through this monotony that the learning of the ancient world survives. Evening comes, and with it, yet another prayer. The cycle is unbroken. Wake, pray, work, eat, pray, work, pray, again. The bells mark the hours, but time feels less like a river and more like a wheel, turning endlessly in place. At supper, bread returns, this time with a thin wedge of cheese. The sharpness surprises you after so many plain meals. You savor it in silence, though the rule warns against dwelling on flavor. A monk eats quickly, without indulgence. When darkness settles again over the cloister, you feel exhaustion in every limb. The day has been a blur of hunger, silence, labor, and chant. And yet, as you lie once more on your straw mattress, the bell waits. It will call again before dawn. The cycle will begin again, and you understand, lying in the darkness, why you would not last long here. It is not the hunger alone or the aching body. It is the surrender of self. Every word, every breath, every thought bent toward obedience. Here, the individual vanishes. Only the monastery remains. You wake again to the sound of the bell. The stone walls keep no warmth, and the air sits heavy with dampness, as if the building itself has absorbed centuries of cold. Rising from your narrow cot feels less like waking from sleep and more like slipping back into duty. There is no choice in the matter. You rise because the bell commands you. This place is governed by rules, and you are learning how tightly they bind. The rule of Saint Benedict, written centuries earlier, is the backbone of this world. Every moment of the day, every gesture of your body is shaped by it. You do not live for yourself. You live for order, humility, and silence. Even the simplest actions are guided by ritual. When you enter the chapel, you bow. When you leave, you bow again. When you pass another monk in the corridor, you lower your eyes. When you wash your hands before meals, you do it in silence. The sound of water trickling into the basin, louder than your own breathing. The rules are not suggestions, they are habits pressed into your bones. The first lesson is obedience. You are not meant to argue or question. The abbot, the leader of the monastery, speaks as if his word is law. If he tells you to copy pages until your hand cramps, you do it. If he sends you to the fields in the pouring rain, you go. If he assigns you the harshest penance for the smallest slip, you accept it without complaint. You are not an individual here. You are a thread in a larger fabric, woven into place by obedience. Humility is the second lesson. Pride has no home in the cloister. You eat the same food as the poorest monk, wear the same coarse robe, kneel on the same hard stone floor. There are no titles spoken here, no rich garments to separate one from another. Even the abbot dresses in the same simple habit, though his authority sets him apart. You bow your head not just in ritual, but in constant reminder that you are nothing and God is everything. The third lesson is poverty. All that you once owned is gone. No coin jingles in your pouch. No trinket rests at your bedside. If you had brought anything into this place, it would have been surrendered, placed into the monastery's keeping. You share everything. Food, tools, even the books in the library belong not to you, but to the community. Poverty here is not a punishment, but a choice, or at least the choice you made when you crossed the threshold and vowed to stay. The weight of these rules settles slowly over you, heavier than the wool habit on your shoulders. At first, they seem small, bowing your head before speaking, keeping your hands folded, lowering your eyes. But in time you realize how total they are, how they stretch into every moment. Take the meal, for instance. You file into the refectory in silence, each monk bowing before taking his place. You do not eat until the abbot has signaled. You do not linger over food, no matter how hungry you are. You do not speak a word. Even the way you hold your spoon is done carefully, measured against the expectations of discipline. If you reach too quickly, if you break a crumb of bread carelessly, another monk may notice, and if he notices, he may report it. Small infractions are not ignored. They are met with penance. Sometimes it is as simple as kneeling through a meal without eating. Sometimes it is standing in the chapel for hours, head bowed, while the rest of the community files past you. For repeated failings, the punishment can be silence that lasts for days, your voice withheld, your presence ignored, until you prove yourself humble enough to return. You learn quickly to fear these quiet corrections, not because they hurt, but because they remind you how thin the line is between belonging and exclusion. To live in a monastery is to live constantly aware that you are always watched, not by God alone, but by every brother beside you. The rituals extend into the smallest hours of the day. When the bell tolls, you rise, no matter how weary. When you sit at your desk in the scriptorium, you bow your head before beginning your work. When you step into the cloister garden, you trace the sign of the cross. Everything is framed, contained, pressed into ritual. It leaves no room for wandering thought, no space for rebellion. And yet, you notice how the rhythm begins to change you. At first, the silence feels suffocating. Now it feels steady, like the soft hum of a distant tide. At first, the rules chafe. Now they pull you forward, hour by hour, like stones in a path that cannot be strayed from. The discipline is sharp, but in its sharpness it creates a strange sort of peace. The abbot himself is distant but ever present. You see him in the chapel leading the prayers, his voice steady above the rest. You see him in the refectory, breaking bread before anyone else touches theirs. You see him in the cloister walk, moving slowly, hands folded, eyes lowered. His authority is quiet, but absolute. In him, the rule takes form. He is both shepherd and judge, father and master. To disobey him is to disobey God. Once, while working in the gardens, you slip. A tool clatters to the stones, and though no words are spoken, another monk's eyes fix on you. Later, in the chapel, the abbot's gaze lingers as he passes. You feel the weight of that look more heavily than any scolding. The next day, you are assigned an extra hour of labor. No word is spoken of your mistake, but the message is clear. The rituals reach beyond the body and into the mind. You find yourself watching your own thoughts, scolding yourself for pride, for laziness, for distraction. You bow your head, not only before others, but before yourself. The rule becomes not just an outer framework, but an inner voice, one that measures every gesture, every breath. Even sleep is governed by ritual. You lie on your cot in silence, your body still aching from the day's labor. And before you close your eyes, you trace the sign of the cross. You wake when the bell commands, not when your body wishes. Your life belongs not to your will, but to the rhythm of the monastery. It is not an easy rhythm. It strips you bare, takes away not only possessions, but also the freedom to act, to speak, even to think as you once did. And yet within its strictness, you begin to understand how men endured it for years, for decades, even for a lifetime. The rituals create a pattern as steady as the heartbeat of the bells. They erase the chaos of the outside world, replacing it with certainty. Still, as you kneel again in the chapel, your knees sore from the unyielding stone, your throat dry from chanting, you feel the weight of it. The life of obedience, humility, and poverty is not one you chose easily. It demands more than you imagined. And as the voices rise once more in unison, you wonder quietly if you could endure a lifetime of such rules, or if this single day is already enough to break you. You step quietly through the corridors of a convent, the walls heavy with age and damp stone. The air smells faintly of herbs and candle smoke, a mixture that is both comforting and strange, carrying the memory of countless generations of women who lived here. The morning light filters through narrow windows, falling on the wooden floors in soft strips. Somewhere nearby, a bell tolls, low and distant, marking the hour for prayer. You follow the echoing footsteps of a figure ahead, a woman whose presence seems to command both attention and reverence, even in silence. This is Hildegard of Bingen. You cannot help but notice how she moves, robes swaying lightly, hands often clasped, eyes distant yet aware. There is a sense that she sees more than what is in the room. Perhaps she does, for she speaks often of visions, images and lights that visit her in solitude, guiding her thoughts and her work. You watch her approach a table cluttered with parchment and quills. Her hands are steady as she dips the quill into ink, not hurried, not distracted, but deliberate. Each letter she traces onto the page carries weight, not just of language, but of ideas that reach beyond these walls. You wonder what she is writing. The words will later become volumes on theology, medicine, and the mysteries of the natural world. They will carry her visions to those who have never stepped into this cloister. As you settle onto a bench nearby, you notice the herbs laid out in small bundles along the shelves: mint, sage, thyme, valerian. The scent is faint, earthy. Hildegard moves among them, hands brushing over leaves, inhaling their fragrance, as if listening to a secret language. She prepares remedies, noting the effects of each plant on the body. In a world where illness is common and medicine scarce, her knowledge is rare. You realize that even within the strict walls of the convent, she is a healer, a keeper of secrets, a woman whose hands touch both body and spirit. The bell rings again, pulling you both to the chapel. You follow Hildegard, your footsteps muted on the worn stone floors. She kneels, her posture reverent but not rigid. As the chanting begins, you notice how her voice blends with the others. Not overpowering, not seeking recognition, but present. She has composed much of this music herself, melodies that rise and fall in ways that seem almost otherworldly. The notes echo against the high ceilings, carrying a sense of hope, of awe, of something beyond the mundane world. You feel the vibrations in your chest, as if the music itself is trying to communicate truths too vast for words alone. After the service, you follow her into a small scriptorium. Light falls softly across the pages she is illuminating. She works carefully, adding intricate designs to the margins, images of plants, animals, angels, and visions she has experienced. Each stroke of the brush seems meditative, deliberate, as if the hand is translating a vision into something tangible. You realize how rare this skill is, also to combine devotion, artistry, and insight in a way that will last beyond a single lifetime. Later, Hildegard calls you into the garden. The sun is warmer now, soft on your shoulders, and the scent of the earth mingles with the fragrance of flowers. She bends to a small plant, showing you its leaves, explaining how it can be used to soothe a cough or calm a fever. Her voice is steady, calm and precise, carrying authority without the need for loudness. You watch her hands as they move over the herbs, wondering how one person can hold so much knowledge, so much care, and still move through the day with the same quiet grace. You notice how other visitors, when they arrive, speak to her with a mixture of awe and hesitation. Nobles, bishops, even emperors send letters seeking counsel. And yet in her presence, you feel the same humility she requires of herself. She does not rush. She listens. She weighs words carefully before responding. Even when her advice challenges powerful men, even when her visions speak truths that authorities might find uncomfortable, she remains composed. You sense that she has learned to temper passion with patience, insight with humility. The afternoon stretches long. You follow her to the cloister's library, where rows of books stand in quiet order. Some are chained to the shelves, their spines worn from centuries of study. Hildegard moves among them, reading passages aloud softly to herself, her voice a whisper against the stillness. She pauses, reflects, writes notes in the margins, her hand guided not just by intellect, but by a vision of the divine. You feel the weight of centuries pressing into the room. Knowledge preserved, ideas passed down, a continuity of thought that survives even in the most confined spaces. You watch her take a moment of solitude in her private cell. A candle flickers on the small table, casting shadows across the walls. She kneels, not for show, but as a necessity of faith, and closes her eyes. You sense that this is when the visions come, lights, colors, forms that speak in silence, unbound by language. And you understand watching her that these visions are not merely imagination, They are a bridge connecting the human and the divine, guiding her work in music, medicine, and writing. Evening approaches and the cloister grows quiet. The chants have ended, the garden is empty, and the corridors echo only with your own steps. Hildegard moves through the halls, checking on the other sisters, offering guidance, encouragement, or a gentle correction when needed. Her presence is calming, almost luminous in its steadiness. You realize that her authority comes not from force, but from consistency, knowledge, and the depth of her understanding. At supper, you sit together in silence. The meal is simple: bread, broth, perhaps a small portion of vegetables. You eat without speaking as the rules demand, but there is an unspoken understanding between you. You have followed her through the rhythms of the day, observed her work, and felt the quiet power she carries. You begin to see how one person, even confined within walls and rules, can leave an imprint that stretches beyond the cloister, beyond the city, beyond time itself. After the meal, the lamps are lit for the final prayers. You kneel with the others, and for a moment you feel the same harmony that Hildegard must have felt while composing her chants. The voices rise, intertwining, echoing in the high ceilings, and you feel as if the day has come full circle. The work, the visions, the knowledge, the ritual, all are threads in a larger tapestry, each movement of the hand, each note sung, each herb tended, part of something enduring. As the bell tolls for night, you follow her back to the cell. She moves with the same careful grace, taking a last glance at the candles flickering along the corridor. You realize that life here is not easy, but it is purposeful. You lie down on your mattress, the straw rough against your back, and you feel the hum of the convent settle around you. You have seen a day in her life, a life of vision, of music, of healing, of counsel, and it is a life shaped not only by faith, but by discipline, by observation, and by the courage to speak truth, even when it challenges authority. You close your eyes, and for a moment you imagine the colors she sees in her visions, the melody she hears, the plants she tends. You imagine that even in darkness, even in silence, the world is alive with possibility. And you understand with a quiet awe that one person's insight, devotion, and perseverance can echo across centuries, shaping minds long after the stone walls have grown cold. You wake to the sound of the bell, muffled at first by the thickness of the stone walls, but insistent, pulling you from the fragile warmth of sleep. The mattress is hard beneath you, the coarse wool of your habit rubbing against your skin, but you rise anyway. Today the rhythm of the monastery draws you toward a different kind of labor, one of beauty, precision, and devotion, a labor that is quiet, yet all-consuming. You follow the dimly lit corridor to the chapel, where light filters through stained glass windows. The colors are muted in the morning sun, soft blues and reds that spill across the stone floors. You kneel with the others, head bowed, as the first notes of Gregorian chant fill the air. At first, the sound is gentle, almost like a ripple across water. Then it deepens, rising and falling in waves that reach into your chest. You feel the vibration through your bones, the sound wrapping around you like a blanket, comforting yet demanding attention. You are part of it now, one voice among many, each syllable measured, each breath drawn in unison. The chant is not just music, it is prayer, movement, devotion made audible. The notes carry old stories, lessons whispered across generations, each line a bridge between the mortal and the divine. You close your eyes and let yourself drift, feeling the meditative pull of repetition. Time stretches and contracts. Minutes slip by unnoticed. In this sound there is both discipline and release, a rhythm that is at once exacting and infinitely forgiving. After the service, you follow the quiet corridors to the scriptorium. Sunlight filters through tall windows, casting long lines across the wooden desks. Here, the work is different, but no less sacred. You pick up a quill, its feather soft in your fingers, and dip it carefully into the ink. The smell of the ink is earthy, pungent, carrying with it the weight of centuries. You place the quill on the parchment and begin to trace letters slowly, deliberately, each curve and line a meditation. Around you, others are engaged in the same careful labor. One monk works on an illuminated manuscript, painting tiny, intricate designs in vivid colors. You lean closer, noticing the tiny brushstrokes that form angels, vines, and mythical creatures. Each image is precise, yet flowing, as if the hand that draws is guided by something unseen. You feel yourself pulled into the rhythm, the repetitive motion, soothing, like water lapping against a quiet shore. The act of creating becomes a prayer itself, each mark a dedication, each color a whisper to the divine. You notice the small details, gold leaf catching the light, turning each page into something that glows almost unnaturally. The way the vellum bends slightly under the pressure of the brush, the smell of paint and parchment mingling in the warm air of the room. Every stroke is slow, unhurried, deliberate. It is not a race, and there is no need for haste. Here, speed is meaningless. Attention and intention are everything. You feel a strange serenity in it, a sense that in this quiet, repetitive labor, you touch something eternal. After hours of copying and illuminating, you move toward the cloister where the sunlight spills across the arches. The garden beyond is quiet, still, a living complement to the ordered beauty inside. Here too the monks find rhythm in repetition, pruning, watering, planting in neat rows. Even the act of tending herbs and flowers becomes prayerful, each careful gesture echoing the devotion inside the scriptorium. You pause and watch the sunlight touch the leaves, the shadows stretching long and slow, and you feel the same contemplative peace that comes from music and manuscript work. Later, the sound of the bell calls you back to the chapel. The chanting begins again, rising in the mid-morning light. You join in, voice steady, letting the notes carry you, letting the vibrations settle into your chest and arms. You notice that even within the repetition, there is variation, a subtle rise and fall, a moment of hesitation, a flourish in the melody. It reminds you that devotion is not just rigid adherence, it is alive, shaped by each participant, each breath, each moment of awareness. After prayer, you are sent to examine the stained glass windows. You walk slowly along the nave, tracing the sunlight as it passes through colored glass. Angels, saints, biblical scenes, every panel tells a story. The glass is thick, uneven, slightly rough under your fingertips. The lead frames hold it together, bending slightly under the weight, yet the images remain luminous. You trace the lines with your eyes, noticing the attention to detail, the skill required to combine color, light, and story into a single, coherent whole. In these windows, time and devotion are frozen, yet they pulse with life each morning when the sun strikes them just right. You pause before a depiction of a monk at his desk, quill in hand, much like the one you occupy yourself. You imagine the artist who created it centuries ago working slowly, deliberately, imagining each detail as an act of reverence. And you realize that you are part of the same lineage, continuing the work of devotion through motion and repetition, through careful attention and dedication. The act of creating, writing, painting, singing is not separate from faith. It is an extension of it, a bridge between the temporal and the eternal. Evening approaches and the chapel grows quiet again. You sit on a hard wooden bench, listening to the soft hum of the candles flickering, the faint rustle of robes as the monks file past. You feel the weight of the day in your muscles, in your back, in your fingers, stiff from holding quill and brush. Yet there is satisfaction here, a deep calm, a sense that time spent in deliberate mindful labor has meaning beyond itself. You have sung, written, painted, observed, and each act has been a meditation, a connection to something larger than yourself. You wander back through the cloister to your cell, the sun low now, bathing the courtyard in gold. The stone walls are quiet, absorbing the fading light. You pause, noticing the shadows stretching long across the floor, and feel a profound sense of stillness. In the rhythm of daily ritual, the chant, the scriptorium, the garden, the windows, you have found a steady pulse, a gentle, slow heartbeat that carries the weight of devotion and centuries of accumulated care. At night, as you lie on your straw mattress, the remnants of light fading from the windows, you think of the chants, the manuscripts, the glowing glass. You remember the careful brushstrokes, the repetition of letters and notes, the patient rhythm that turns work into prayer. And you understand with a quiet awe that the true artistry of the monastery is not in spectacle or grandeur, but in the slow, deliberate shaping of the ordinary into the sacred. You close your eyes, letting the echoes of music and color settle over you. You imagine the quills moving across parchment, the soft hum of voices in the chapel, the sunlight shifting through stained glass. In these small, repetitive acts, you sense a continuity that stretches across centuries, connecting every monk who has bent over ink and vellum, every voice that has joined in the chant, every hand that has placed stone or glass with care. And you realize that in this rhythm, this meditative labor, there is something eternal, something that lasts long after the stone has grown cold and the candles have burned away. You walk down a narrow corridor, the stone walls smooth under your fingertips, cool and almost damp from centuries of weather pressing in from outside. The morning light filters through tiny, high windows, falling in thin beams that dust the floor with gold. Somewhere far off, a bell rings softly, carrying through the stillness. Today, your steps are guided by something both fragile and extraordinary. A book, unlike any you have ever held. You enter a small chamber, quiet and secluded, and there it rests on a wooden stand, bound in leather darkened by age. The Book of Kells. You approach carefully, aware of the centuries that have passed since its creation. You can almost feel the hands that labored over it, moving slowly, deliberately, quill and brush, guided by devotion and precision. The pages are delicate, yet vibrant, filled with images and letters that seem alive, as if the ink itself hums with energy. You reach out to turn a page, fingers trembling slightly. Each page is a landscape of intricate design, swirls and knots intertwining in patterns that seem to shift as your eyes move across them. Tiny figures of saints, angels, and mythic creatures hide among the spirals. You imagine the monk who first drew these lines, sitting for hours, candlelight flickering, ink at hand, every motion a prayer. There is no rush. Every stroke is careful, deliberate, purposeful. As you lean closer, you notice the colors. Reds, blues, greens, and gold leaf shine subtly against the parchment, not harsh, but luminous, as if catching light from within. The pigments themselves were rare, painstakingly prepared from plants, minerals, and insects. Every hue a precious gift, every shade a meditation on patience and devotion. You imagine the time it must have taken to mix the colors, to apply them in perfect harmony, knowing that one mistake could spoil the page. You see the letters themselves, not mere marks of language, but works of art. The Latin text curves and twists, sometimes encircling small figures, sometimes forming patterns in rhythm with the illustrations. It is as if the words themselves are alive, not simply conveying meaning, but breathing with the same spiritual energy that drove the monk's hand. You trace them with your finger, careful not to touch the fragile surface, and feel a connection to a mind long gone but preserved in ink and vellum. Outside, the wind presses against the stone walls, carrying faint echoes of the outside world. The call of birds, the distant chatter of a market, the soft rustle of leaves. Inside, the room is still. Time seems to pause here, suspended between centuries. You imagine Viking longships arriving on distant shores, raiding monasteries, taking treasure, destroying what they could not understand. And yet this book survived, hidden in a corner, smuggled away, preserved by those who understood its value. You feel the weight of its survival, the quiet miracle that allows you to hold this glimpse of the past. You turn another page, and your eyes catch a tiny detail. A hidden face peering out from the scrollwork. Perhaps a monk's self-portrait, perhaps a symbolic figure meant to remind the reader of the unseen watcher. Every page hides little secrets like this, small treasures tucked into the rhythm of design. You feel a thrill at discovering them, as if you have become part of the chain of eyes and hands that have studied this book for 1,000 years. The more pages you turn, the more you notice the patterns. Spirals, interlacing knots, circles within circles. Some designs seem almost dizzying, intricate enough to demand long, careful attention. You find yourself tracing each line with your gaze, feeling the slow pulse of the artist's hand in your chest. This is not just decoration. Every brushstroke, every curve is a prayer. Every pattern is an act of devotion meant to lift the mind toward the divine, to focus the eye, to calm the soul. You pause at a page filled with gold leaf, reflecting the light so that it seems to shimmer with its own life. The illumination catches your breath. You imagine the monk leaning over the page, candlelight flickering across his features, hand steady despite the hours spent bent over the desk. You feel the care that went into each mark, the knowledge that this book was meant to outlast not just its creator, but the ravages of time itself. The Book of Kells is not simply a text, it is a universe. You find your eyes tracing the smallest details, tiny birds hidden among vines, a miniature lion curling around a letter, geometric patterns that seem infinite. Each page holds a lesson in patience, observation, and reverence. You feel a strange kinship with the Creator, sensing the concentration, the quiet dedication, the way each stroke of the quill was a meditation, a conversation with the divine. You notice the symbols embedded in the artwork. Fish representing Christ, vines representing growth and life, angels reaching from one corner to the next. You realize that each design carries multiple layers of meaning, some obvious, some hidden, intended to be discovered over time. You imagine the monks who would have studied these pages, reading them slowly, word by word, image by image, letting the layers of symbolism sink into their minds and hearts. Hours pass, though time is hard to measure here. You lean over the pages again, marveling at the endurance of the book, its survival through raids, neglect, and centuries of movement. You feel the fragility of the parchment beneath your fingertips, yet also its resilience. You imagine it being carried from monastery to monastery, hidden in chests, guarded, revered, a treasure both earthly and spiritual. The room grows quiet as the light shifts, the sun falling lower, casting long shadows across the desks. You sit back, letting your gaze linger over the intricate lines and brilliant colors, absorbing the care, the devotion, the genius embedded in every page. You feel the slow pulse of time, the centuries of hands, eyes, and minds connected through this single artifact. It is more than a book. It is a bridge across history, a vessel of human patience, creativity, and faith. You imagine closing the book gently, turning it carefully so as not to disturb the delicate ink and gold. The pages whisper as they settle, and you feel the same reverence that must have filled the monks who first held it. You walk back through the corridor, the stone cold beneath your feet, the air scented faintly of old parchment. Outside, the wind presses gently against the walls, carrying with it the echoes of lives lived long ago, echoes that continue to speak through the quiet miracle of this book. As evening approaches, you sit in the cloister, letting the memory of the manuscript settle into your mind. You think of the hands that labored over it, the eyes that studied it, the centuries it has survived. You feel a quiet awe at the meditative patience, the devotion, the artistry that combine to create something both fragile and eternal. And in the hush of the monastery, you understand how something so small, a book, a few inches of vellum, can carry the weight of generations, can speak across time, can connect you to a world long, vanished yet still alive in its details. You close your eyes and imagine the pages again, swirling patterns, hidden creatures, gold that catches the light. You hear faintly the echo of a quill scratching against parchment, the soft flicker of candle flames, the whisper of monks moving through the cloister. You breathe in the stillness, letting it settle around you, and feel yourself drifting, carried on the quiet current of history, creativity, and devotion that lives in the Book of Kells. You awaken not to the clang of bells echoing across stone corridors, but to the quiet murmur of servants moving softly through your chambers. The air is warmer here, scented faintly with herbs and incense, and the bed beneath you is padded, piled with blankets and soft linens. You stretch, the fabric smooth against your skin, and for a moment you allow yourself to feel the comfort of it. Life here is measured not by discipline alone, but by privilege, and you are conscious of the contrast with the austere mornings of the monastery you visited before. Your robe is heavy with fine cloth, richly dyed, the hem embroidered with subtle patterns that catch the morning light. Servants wait patiently as you dress, assisting in the careful arrangement of layers. Gold trim glints along your sleeves, a jeweled clasp holds a mantle in place. You feel the weight of these adornments not as burden, but as status, a quiet, constant reminder that your position carries authority and respect, even reverence. You walk through corridors wider than any monastery hallway, lined with tapestries that soften the echoes of your steps. They depict saints, battles, and the life of Christ, rich in color and detail. Sunlight streams through large windows, illuminating the marble floors in warm patches. The air is filled with the faint scent of incense lingering from the previous night's service. It is a world of calm order, yet one carefully constructed to signal power and influence. The first meal of the day is served in your private chamber, not in the communal refectory of monks. You eat in relative silence, though the table is set lavishly. Bread, soft and golden, cheese from distant lands, fresh fruits you cannot name, and spiced wine in a delicate cup. You taste each bite slowly, noting the textures and flavors, aware that your sustenance is more than food. It is a reminder of your station. You do not fast, at least not in the way the monks do. Deprivation is reserved for others, and your day will unfold with meetings, advice, and the management of lands and people. After the meal, you move to your study. The room is lined with shelves of books, some bound in leather, others written on vellum, chains securing them to the shelves. You sit at a carved desk, quill in hand, and review letters from kings, nobles, and other bishops. Each message carries weight. Some ask for counsel, others seek your influence in disputes of land or law. You read carefully, considering how your decisions may ripple outward, affecting towns, villages, and entire regions. There is a quiet satisfaction in this power, tempered by responsibility. Each decision is a negotiation of conscience and politics. Soon visitors arrive, courtiers, knights, even merchants seeking favors. You meet them in a hall lined with tapestries and polished stone, your voice calm but firm. They bow, and you nod in acknowledgement, aware that your gestures, even as small as a tilt of the head, are part of the subtle choreography of power. Conversation flows easily, but each word carries weight. Promises, assurances, and warnings are given in measured tones. You feel the influence you wield, not as a burden, but as a mantle you have grown into, one crafted over years of study, prayer, and diplomacy. The midday meal is lighter, often taken in a company of close advisors. Food is simple compared to breakfast, but still richer than any monk could imagine. Stewed meats, fresh bread, and wine served in bowls of pewter or silver. Conversation flows more freely here, laughter soft but controlled. You discuss matters of the diocese, hear reports from distant lands, and occasionally speak with neighboring bishops about church policies and the delicate balance of authority. Your voice carries easily in the hall, each word shaping events beyond the walls of your residence. Afterward, you take a walk through the gardens. They are meticulously kept, trimmed hedges, flowering shrubs, and fountains with water glimmering in the sunlight. Servants follow at a respectful distance, attending to minor tasks. You pause to admire the roses, to watch the birds alight on branches, and feel the ease of the space. Even in luxury, there is rhythm and order here, much like in the monastery. Though the rhythm is softer, guided by aesthetic and comfort rather than strict obedience. In the afternoon, you attend to the spiritual duties of your office. You walk to the chapel, your steps echoing softly in the vaulted hallways. Candles flicker along the aisles, and sunlight streams through stained glass, casting multicolored patterns onto the marble floor. You bless those who approach for guidance, your voice firm but gentle, invoking the rituals and prayers that have shaped the church for centuries. You see the devotion in the eyes of the faithful, the quiet respect in their gestures, and you understand the weight of the spiritual influence you wield alongside temporal power. Some afternoons are spent in councils or courts, mediating disputes between nobles or deciding matters of land and inheritance. You sit at a high-backed chair, quill in hand, occasionally rising to inspect documents or hear witnesses. The work is meticulous, demanding patience, knowledge of canon and civil law, and a careful balance of fairness and authority. You are both judge and guide, responsible not only for spiritual welfare, but for the maintenance of order and justice in the lands entrusted to you. Evening approaches, and the halls of your residence glow in the light of hundreds of candles. The sounds of the day soften, distant footsteps of servants, the rustle of tapestries in a faint breeze, the murmur of voices from distant rooms. You attend Vespers, chanting alongside other clergy, and for a moment you sense the echo of the monastic life you have observed. The chant is slower here, more ceremonial, more performative than meditative, yet it carries the same intent: devotion, structure, connection to something larger than the self. Dinner is a more elaborate affair, sometimes attended by visiting dignitaries. Plates of roasted meats, seasoned vegetables, and delicate pastries are laid before you. Wine flows in silver goblets. Conversation is polite, careful, and full of subtext. Every word, every glance carries meaning. You are aware of the performance, the projection of authority and culture, and you navigate it with ease. This is a life steeped in power, tempered by ritual and buffered by comfort and ceremony. Later, when the halls have quieted, you retreat to your private chambers. The candles flicker against tapestries, casting shadows that dance slowly across the walls. You remove the heavy robes, feeling the fabric slip from your shoulders, and sit at a small desk to read or write. Letters from distant lands await your attention, notes from clerics seeking guidance, advice from nobles requesting intervention. Your hand moves carefully across the parchment, your mind balancing devotion, prudence, and influence. Even here, in comfort, your responsibilities are inescapable. Finally, you retire to bed. The blankets are warm, soft against your skin. The room is still except for the faint rustle of the night wind and the distant hoot of an owl. You close your eyes, feeling the day settle around you like a cloak. The contrast between your life and that of the monks is clear. Their austerity, their devotion through discipline, their reliance on routine and simplicity, and your own life of influence, comfort, and calculated ritual. And yet in some ways the rhythm is the same: prayer, labor, study, reflection. Only the means differ, shaped by station, responsibility, and the world beyond the cloister walls. You drift towards sleep, the weight of the day fading, the luxury of your bed holding you gently. The candles have burned low, the last echoes of footsteps have vanished, and you feel the steady pulse of power, devotion, and responsibility settle into your chest. You know that tomorrow the cycle will begin again. Ritual, counsel, movement, and influence, all intertwined in a life that is both worldly and sacred. And you understand as sleep draws near how even in comfort, authority carries its own gravity, shaping not just actions, but the rhythm of thought, the cadence of prayer, and the measure of a life lived in constant balance between temporal power and spiritual duty. You rise before dawn, the cold of the morning seeping through your thin cloak. The road stretches ahead, soft mist clinging to the edges of hedgerows, dew soaking your boots. The sound of distant church bells drifts on the wind, and somewhere far off, a rooster crows, announcing the day. You are not alone, though the silence of the fields makes it feel that way. Other travelers trudge along the same path, their shadows long and wavering in the grey light. Today you are a pilgrim, moving toward Canterbury, driven by devotion, curiosity, or perhaps a mixture of both. The road is uneven, stones pressing into your feet, mud clinging stubbornly to your boots after the night's rain. You shift your weight, trying to ease the ache in your legs, and notice the weight of your pack, the careful placement of provisions for the journey. Bread, wrapped in cloth, dried meat, a flask of water, perhaps a small token to leave at the shrine. Everything you carry is precious, and every step requires mindfulness. You hear the soft slap of boots on dirt, the creak of leather, and you settle into a rhythm, walking and breathing in time with the others. Along the way, the villages are small clusters of timber and thatch, smoke curling from chimneys into the pale morning air. Some villagers are already awake, tending livestock or preparing for the market. You catch glimpses of faces lined with toil, hands rough from labor, eyes bright with curiosity or suspicion at travelers passing through. You nod politely, and occasionally a smile or a wave is returned. Some offer bread or cheese for sale, others guide you toward wells or safe paths. You realize that the road is a living network, a fragile ecosystem of giving and taking, of faith and commerce intertwined. The hardships of the road are relentless. Blisters form beneath your socks, the pack drags at your shoulders, and hunger gnaws quietly between meals. Rain begins to fall in a soft drizzle, seeping through your cloak despite your careful folding. You pull it tighter around yourself, feeling the chill on your neck and wrists, and adjust the pack again. Fellow pilgrims share what they can: a piece of bread, a flask of water, a quiet word of encouragement. There is a sense of fragile camaraderie here, a bond formed not by choice but by necessity, by shared endurance of the journey. you reach a small wayside chapel, the wood darkened by rain and age. Inside, the air smells faintly of candle wax and incense, comforting against the damp and cold. Pilgrims kneel quietly before relics, hands pressed in prayer, lips moving in whispers. You join them, kneeling on the cold stone floor, feeling the weight of devotion that has drawn people to these places for generations. Each relic tells a story. The saint's hand, a fragment of bone, a piece of cloth. You wonder at the belief that these objects carry power, that touching them, seeing them, praying near them can bridge the mortal and divine. You rise and continue, the sound of the river running alongside the road, a steady companion. Children play near the banks, their laughter bright against the low murmur of water. Farmers work in distant fields, their movements rhythmic, almost meditative. You pass under arches of trees, leaves dripping with rain, the smell of earth and green leaves rising with each step. Occasionally, you glimpse a heron or a hawk moving silently above, indifferent to the struggles of the world below. The journey is long, but the road is alive, each sound and scent marking the passage of time as surely as your aching feet. By midday, you stop at a tavern near the crossroads. The smell of stew and baking bread is almost overpowering after the chill and damp of the morning. You find a spot among fellow pilgrims, exchanging stories of the road, of towns passed, of miracles witnessed, of dangers narrowly avoided. The fire crackles, warming hands stiff with cold. You eat slowly, savoring the warmth of food and drink, the shared comfort of human company. Outside, rain continues to fall, but here, in this small hearth, the world feels safer, momentarily suspended in warmth and light. Once fed, you step back onto the road, boots squelching through mud and puddles. The miles stretch ahead, lined with fields, forests, and the occasional inn. Some towns thrive on pilgrims, offering lodging, food, and trinkets for purchase. You notice the careful balance, hospitality mixed with commerce, devotion mingling with profit. Some innkeepers are generous, others less so, charging for bread or water as if it were gold. You learn to tread carefully, polite but wary, aware that faith can be both genuine and exploited along these paths. As the afternoon sun breaks through the clouds, you feel the fatigue settle deeper into your body. The rhythm of walking becomes almost trance-like, each step a meditation. Your mind drifts to the shrine ahead, imagining the relief of arrival, the reverence of kneeling before the altar, the quiet satisfaction of completing this stretch of the pilgrimage. Along the way, you observe small miracles. A flower growing through cracked stone, the flight of birds against the sky, a stream glinting with sunlight. These moments, fleeting and fragile, are stitched into the journey, reminders that the road itself is part of the devotion. The evening brings a final stop before Canterbury. A small village offers modest lodgings, straw beds, warm blankets, and simple meals. You find your bed, exhausted, the aches of the day pressing against your bones. Outside, the wind stirs the trees and the faint clatter of distant hooves reminds you that the road never truly sleeps. You close your eyes, listening to the rhythm of the village, a dog barking, a door creaking, a candle flickering in the window. Tomorrow, the journey will continue, but tonight you rest, carried by the shared experience of countless pilgrims before you. In the quiet moments before sleep, you reflect on the drive that brought you here. The relics, the shrines, the stories of miracles, the prayers offered and heard. These are not just symbols, but lifelines, threads connecting distant lands and disparate lives. You feel a quiet reverence for the endurance of those who walk this road year after year, who face discomfort, weather, and danger to reach a place of spiritual significance. You sense that the pilgrimage is as much about the journey as the destination, that the hardship and the camaraderie, the beauty and the fear, all shape the devotion that carries pilgrims onward. As you drift towards sleep, the road stretches endlessly in your mind, muddy tracks winding through fields, stone bridges spanning rivers, distant spires hinting at the shrine yet to come. You hear the soft murmur of voices, the rustle of cloaks, the whisper of prayers. Each step, each mile, each moment of endurance is a quiet offering, a bridge between the human and the divine. And you understand with a slow, settling calm that the pilgrimage is not just a physical journey, but a meditation in motion, a slow, deliberate act of faith, endurance, and connection, carrying both traveler and observer across time, space, and spirit. You step into the dim light of the chapel, the air thick with incense and the faint musk of centuries-old stone. Candles flicker along the altar, their flames reflecting in polished brass and silver, casting long shadows that stretch across the cold floor. The quiet hum of whispered prayers drifts through the air, interrupted only by the occasional scrape of a wooden bench or the soft shuffle of feet. Today, your attention is drawn not to books or music, but to the strange, magnetic power of relics, objects that carry the weight of faith, devotion, and superstition alike. Ahead, a display of relics rests under glass, each carefully labeled, though the inscriptions are faded and worn. You bend closer, peering through the cool pane. There, a saint's fingerbone, small and bleached by time. Nearby, a scrap of cloth said to have brushed the robes of a holy figure, a tiny vial of blood, preserved carefully in crystal. You feel the gravity of these objects, a pull that is part reverence, part wonder, part unease. There is a sense that they are more than the sum of their materials, that their presence can stir the soul or invoke the miraculous. You reach out, fingers hovering over the glass, imagining the hands that once held these objects, the eyes that once beheld them in awe. Pilgrims have travelled hundreds of miles, braving rain, cold, hunger, and fatigue, all to touch, see, or even smell what is contained within these delicate cases. You wonder if it is the object itself, or the belief surrounding it that carries such power. You can almost hear the echoes of centuries of devotion, the prayers murmured beside these relics, the vows whispered in hope or desperation. The stories surrounding each relic are varied, strange, and sometimes contradictory. One is said to cure blindness, another to protect travelers from storm and theft, yet another to grant fertility or relief from plague. You feel a shiver at the idea that these small, mundane items could be vessels of the divine, conduits for miracles. You imagine the monks who catalogued them, who kept meticulous records of their arrival, their provenance, and the miracles they were said to inspire. For them, attention to detail was not just administrative, it was sacred, a measure of respect for the power these objects were believed to contain. You wander further, tracing the paths of pilgrims through the chapel. Each bench bears the faint indentation of countless knees, worn smooth by repeated devotion. Candles drip wax slowly, pooling and cooling in tiny, precise rivers along the altar's edge. The scent of melted wax and incense mingles with the faint dust of the stone floor, creating a heady, almost intoxicating atmosphere. You feel yourself drawn into the rhythm of centuries, into the quiet devotion of those who came before. Some knelt in silent prayer, others wept, others whispered their wishes aloud. All were united in the belief that these objects could touch the divine. In a corner, a small reliquary glimmers. Gold filigree surrounds what is said to be a saint's tooth. You examine it carefully, noticing the delicate craftsmanship, the tiny hinge that allows it to be opened. The metal is cold under your fingertips, smooth and polished, yet heavy with history. You imagine the hands that placed the relic here, the care with which it was protected during raids, fires, and centuries of human curiosity. You sense the devotion in every curve of the metal, every careful engraving, every layer of lacquer or gold leaf meant to preserve and honor. You move to another display, this one holding a piece of cloth, faded but still recognizable as woven fibers. Pilgrims reach through ropes or glass to touch it, pressing their hands lightly against the surface, hoping for blessing or protection. You can almost feel their faith vibrating through the air, tangible in its intensity. Some skepticism lingers at the edges, as it often does in these spaces. You notice the quiet tension between belief and doubt, the way human minds cling to hope, even while questioning what is real. You feel that tension yourself, a mix of reverence and curiosity, awe and rational hesitation. The chapel feels alive with these contradictions. Candles gutter in gentle draughts, illuminating the reliquaries in shifting patterns. The distant bell chimes the hour, carrying a deep resonance that presses lightly on your chest. You watch other pilgrims move slowly from display to display, some kneeling, some whispering, some leaving offerings of coins or small trinkets. Each action, no matter how small, is part of a ritual that has endured for centuries, connecting the living with the past, the mortal with the holy. You pause at a reliquary containing what is said to be a fragment of a saint's skull. The metalwork is delicate, carved with tiny leaves and angels, and the relic itself is held in a glass vial, suspended like a gem. You imagine the journeys this object has taken, hidden in chests, carried through war and plague, preserved by monks whose lives were devoted to the sacred. The fragility of the item contrasts sharply with the strength of belief surrounding it. You feel the same pull as countless pilgrims before you, a mixture of awe, curiosity, and respect, an unspoken invitation to connect with something beyond yourself. Some relics are stranger still. One holds the footprint of a saint, another, a thorn said, to have pierced the crown of Christ. You feel the human impulse to touch the divine, to grasp what cannot be held, to seek reassurance in physical form. The chapel itself is built to enhance this feeling. Vaulted ceilings echo footsteps and prayers, sunlight through stained glass dances across the floor, and the flicker of candlelight creates movement where there is none. You sense that the architecture, the objects, and the devotion all combine to create a space where the extraordinary seems almost tangible. You step back, taking in the room as a whole. The relics, the flickering candles, the soft hum of whispered prayer, and the filtered sunlight all converge in a quiet symphony. You feel the centuries of faith pressing gently against you, a weight that is neither heavy nor oppressive, but insistent, persistent, unrelenting in its subtle power. You notice the quiet rituals of those around you. The gentle touch of hands to glass, the bowing of heads, the muttered prayers, the small coins dropped into collection boxes. Each gesture is part of a rhythm, a language of devotion passed down through generations. As you move toward the exit, the scents of incense and old stone linger on your cloak. You step into the open air, the sunlight warm against your face, and hear the distant calls of vendors selling trinkets and charms to pilgrims leaving the chapel. Some are peddling small crosses, others small bottles of holy water, amulets for protection. You realize that the line between faith and commerce is thin, sometimes invisible, yet human nature persists. People will seek tangible connection, and others will offer it, however imperfectly. Walking away from the chapel, you feel the weight of centuries in the quiet rhythm of your steps. You carry with you the images of bone, cloth, and glass, the scent of incense, the flicker of candlelight, the whispered prayers that have traveled through stone and air. You sense the devotion that surrounds these objects, the fragile thread connecting the mortal with the divine, the way belief can shape both the world and the people who inhabit it. At night, you lay down on your straw mattress in a small inn near the road, the sounds of wind and distant horses outside your window. You close your eyes, imagining the relics again. The shimmer of gold, the faded cloth, the tiny bones. Each one a story, a conduit, a mystery. You understand with a slow, settling awareness that devotion is often intertwined with superstition, that faith and doubt coexist, and that the human desire to connect with the sacred will always find expression in objects, rituals, and stories, preserved across centuries, alive in every whispered prayer, every careful touch, every step along the road to the divine. You sit in the half-light of a chapel, the flicker of candles casting long, wavering shadows across the stone walls. The air is heavy with incense, sweet and bitter at once, curling around the arches and mingling with the faint chill that slips through the ancient windows. Outside, a soft wind presses against the building, carrying whispers of leaves and distant church bells. You close your eyes for a moment and let the quiet settle around you, drawing you into thought of a place that exists only in imagination and faith. Purgatory. You can almost feel it, the way medieval minds shaped it. An in-between, neither heaven nor hell, a place of waiting and cleansing. You imagine the souls who have passed from the world, finding themselves in this liminal space, surrounded by fire, shadow, and reflection. It is not a place of eternal torment, but neither is it comfort. Pain is part of the process, a purifying ache designed to ready them for the light that waits beyond. You sense the fear it inspired in those who believed in it, the way it pressed upon the living as well as the dead. In this world, prayers take on weight. You kneel, feeling the cold stone beneath your knees, and imagine the hands of family and friends reaching out across the veil. Every whispered prayer, every candle lit, every offering made is a thread, carrying hope to those suspended in this fiery waiting room. You picture the monks and clerics recording masses, reciting the names of the departed, their voices steady and unhurried, a soft rhythm meant to bridge the gap between life and death. Each movement, each word, is part of a larger ritual, a quiet attempt to ease suffering and hasten the journey toward salvation. The economy of indulgences rises naturally from this belief. You see it clearly in your mind, priests offering prayers in exchange for gifts, wealthy patrons seeking relief for themselves or their families, the church carefully calibrating each act of devotion and donation. You sense the tension between faith and obligation, devotion and commerce, the subtle calculation of penance measured against the value of silver or gold. It is a world in which belief is lived materially as much as spiritually, where the hope of easing a soul's suffering shapes behavior as much as the fear of punishment. You imagine the souls themselves suspended in a glow of heat and shadow, their suffering measured, controlled, purposeful. Some are racked by fire that does not destroy, others encased in darkness that reveals truth. There is a rhythm to this suffering, a pattern that echoes the orderliness of the monastic life. You can almost hear the faint sighs of the departed, mingling with the prayers of the living, a quiet symphony of devotion and expectation. Candles flicker across the walls, illuminating frescoes that depict saints guiding souls, angels carrying prayers, and devils waiting at the margins. You trace the lines with your eyes, noticing the deliberate care, the symbolism woven into every gesture. You imagine the artists and scribes who created these images, their hands moving slowly, deliberately, every brushstroke and line a prayer in itself, a guide for the living to understand the mysteries of death and what may follow. You walk through a small cemetery adjacent to the church, the ground soft beneath your boots, the grass dotted with headstones and simple markers. The air is damp, faintly earthy, and the scent of damp stone rises from the graves. You feel the weight of centuries pressing down, the lives that have passed, each one tethered to the belief in purgatory, each one remembered with prayer and offering. You pick up a fallen leaf and let it drift to the ground, imagining it as a symbol of fleeting life, a reminder of the fragile bridge between mortality and eternity. The rituals designed to ease soul's passage are precise, almost mechanical in their repetition, yet they carry the warmth of human care. Bells toll for the dead, marking hours of remembrance. Masses are said, candles lit in patterns and prayers whispered in the quiet corners of chapels and monasteries. You feel the rhythm of these actions, slow and steady, each gesture part of a larger effort to soothe, protect, and guide. You imagine the monk's eyes, lined with age or strain, focusing intently on each syllable, each gesture, fully aware of the stakes involved. You sense the fears that drove these practices. The fear of eternal separation from the divine, the terror of lingering unrest, the anxiety that a soul might languish longer than necessary. Families plan meticulously, offerings of money, gifts to the church, arrangements for masses and prayers. You notice the human impulse behind these actions, the desire to act, to intervene, to connect the living with the dead. You feel the same impulse, the quiet tension between helplessness and action, faith and doubt, love and fear. The imagery of purgatory is vivid, almost tactile. You imagine flames that do not burn away, shadows that do not overwhelm, and light that flickers just out of reach. You imagine the souls moving through this space, each step measured, each experience designed to cleanse and prepare. There is order in the suffering, an almost architectural precision, as if the world beyond life mirrors the rhythm and hierarchy of the monastic orders you have observed. You sit in the corner of the chapel again, listening to the wind brushing against the stone, and let your mind wander. You imagine a family lighting candles for a deceased loved one, children placing small coins on a shrine, a nobleman commissioning a mass in exchange for prayers. You feel the quiet persistence of hope in these acts, the human need to touch the untouchable, to influence what is beyond comprehension. The boundary between life and death is thin, and belief stretches across it like a fragile bridge. Outside, the night falls, and the shadows of the chapel lengthen. You walk slowly, feeling the cold stone beneath your hands as you trace the carvings along the wall. Angels, demons, and saints stare down at you, frozen in perpetual action. You imagine the hands that carved these figures, the minds that conceived their forms, the faith that infused every detail. And in this stillness, you sense that purgatory is not only a place for the dead, but also a guide for the living, a structure, a map, a reflection of fears, hopes, and devotion. As you lay down later, the wind brushing softly against the windows, you close your eyes and picture the souls in that in-between space, the flames and shadows, the prayers drifting upward like smoke. You hear the faint echo of bells, the soft murmur of voices long past, and feel the quiet weight of centuries of belief pressing gently against your chest. You understand, in the slow settling of awareness, that purgatory was as much a creation of the living as it was a destination for the dead, a way to mediate fear, inspire devotion, and shape behavior in a world where the boundaries between the mortal and the divine were ever present, yet never fully understood. You drift towards sleep, carried on the gentle rhythm of the chapel, the prayers, the flickering candles, and the distant echo of souls in purification. You feel a connection across time to monks, priests, nobles, and ordinary families, all bound by the same hope that love, devotion, and careful ritual could ease suffering and secure a place in the light beyond. In this quiet, slow, and deliberate space, you sense the human impulse to shape the unknown, to bridge life and death with faith, and to find solace in the belief that even in the shadows of purgatory, mercy and redemption are within reach. You wake before the first light, the chill of dawn slipping through the thin walls of a stone commandery. Outside, the wind carries the faint scent of pine and smoke curling across the courtyard where armor glints faintly in the early haze. You move slowly, aware of the weight not just of the sword at your side, but of a vow, poverty, chastity, obedience, curiously bound to a life of combat. You are a Templar, a monk, a warrior, and every step across the cold stone reminds you of the paradox you live daily. Devotion and battle intertwined. The morning begins with prayer, the low murmur of voices echoing across the vaulted ceilings. You kneel on a hard floor, hands clasped, feeling the chill seep into your skin. Every syllable is deliberate, every breath measured. Around you, your brothers chant, their tones steady and precise, blending devotion with discipline. There is no music here, no melody to soften the words, only the cadence of faith and repetition. You sense the weight of centuries of monastic practice, carried now into a life where both sword and psalm are equally necessary. After prayers, you attend to your armor. The metal is cold, heavy, and precise, each plate fitting snugly, each strap secured with care. You move slowly, aware that this is both protection and symbol, that the armor tells a story as much as it shields your body. You feel the weight of history pressing against your shoulders. The vows taken centuries before, the battles fought, the legends whispered in dim halls. The Templar cross, stitched boldly upon your tunic, marks you as something other, a member of a brotherhood both holy and martial. Breakfast is sparse, bread and cheese, with a small jug of water, eaten quickly. There is no luxury here, no indulgence. The Templars live by discipline and frugality, their austerity a mirror of their monastic beginnings. You notice the contrast between the simplicity of the meal and the weight of the responsibilities you bear. Every bite is fuel for the day, for marches, for training, for the battles that may come. Yet even in this simplicity there is a quiet camaraderie, a sense that every brother shares the same path, the same burdens, the same devotion. Training follows. You move across the yard, leather and steel rubbing against one another, the scent of sweat and metal mingling in the morning air. Horses whinny in distant stables, their warmth and power a sharp contrast to the hard cold of stone. You practice maneuvers, sword swings, and shield formations, each motion precise, almost meditative in its repetition. The sun rises slowly, casting long shadows across the courtyard, and the rhythmic clash of metal becomes almost musical, a meditation in motion. You feel both strength and exhaustion, the body learning, remembering, enduring. Beyond the walls, the world is uncertain. You hear rumors of raids, of distant lands calling for help, of the need to protect pilgrims and holy sites. You imagine riding across deserts and mountains, dust and heat pressing against your skin, the wind biting in the valleys, and yet your heart remains anchored in faith. Each mission, each battle is a sacred act, a service to both God and brotherhood. The paradox is constant. You are sworn to peace and prayer, yet you prepare for war and bloodshed, and both are holy in the Templar vision. Legends surround your order, whispered by common folk and nobles alike. Treasures hidden in secret vaults, relics stolen and safeguarded, maps that lead to unimaginable wealth. You hear the stories at night when the courtyard is quiet and the wind rattles shutters. They are half truth, half imagination, yet they linger, shaping perceptions of the Templars as both devout and dangerous, holy and worldly. You wonder, as you lie on your straw mattress, whether the legends will outlast the order itself, whether they will speak more powerfully of you than your prayers or your battles ever could. Visits from pilgrims and nobles punctuate your days. They bring requests for protection, guidance, and favor. You meet them in halls cooled by stone and softened with the faint scent of incense and animal hide. The contrast between the austerity of your life and the opulence of those who seek your help is striking. You navigate it with careful courtesy, balancing humility with authority. You sense the respect in their gestures, the hope that your order carries divine approval, and the subtle fear that comes from knowing that power, even cloaked in faith, is never entirely safe. Afternoons are often spent in planning or study. Maps, letters, and reports are spread across wooden tables, illuminated by sunlight or flickering candles. You consider the routes for caravans, the protection of pilgrims, the defense of fortresses. You see the broader picture, the intricate network of allegiance and obligation that ties your order to kings, popes, and distant lands. Every decision carries weight, and you feel it in your chest, a slow pulse that reminds you that devotion is not only spiritual but strategic. Evenings return you to prayer, reflection, and modest meals. The chapel is quiet, save for the low murmur of brothers kneeling. You trace your hands across the cold stone floor, bow your head, and let your mind drift over the day's exertions. The clang of armor, the steady rhythm of marching boots, the heat of midday sun, the chill of stone walls, they all converge in your memory, forming a pattern, a narrative, a meditation on the strange life you inhabit. You feel both grounded and suspended, a monk, a warrior, a witness to faith lived in extremes. Night brings silence. You lie on a thin mattress, the wind whispering through cracks in the stone. Outside, the stars shine coldly, distant and unyielding. You imagine the lives of those you protect, the pilgrims moving across distant roads, the distant cities and fortresses that rely on your order's vigilance. Your mind drifts to the stories of treasures lost and found, of betrayal and persecution, of the eventual downfall that looms like a shadow centuries later. You feel the fragility of human institutions, the impermanence of even the most sacred orders, and yet a quiet pride in being part of something larger than yourself. As sleep settles in, the rhythm of the day lingers in your mind. The clang of metal, the chant of prayer, the weight of armor and vows, the sense of duty pressing both outward and inward. You are part of a lineage of devotion and battle, of faith expressed through both piety and steel. The paradox is no longer discomforting. It is familiar, a quiet meditation that carries you into the night. You sense the order, the discipline, the paradoxical holiness of a life spent balancing war and worship, and let it guide you towards sleep, the gentle weight of history settling around you like a cloak. You rise in the grey light of dawn, the chill of the stone floor brushing your bare feet. Outside, the world is still cloaked in mist, and the faint coo of pigeons echoes from the courtyard. You are a nun, one among many, bound by vows of silence, obedience, and devotion. Yet the world within the convent is quietly alive, a rhythm that balances confinement with freedom, devotion with thought, prayer with the subtle stirrings of intellect. You pull your habit around your shoulders, the fabric coarse against your skin, and step into the hall for morning prayer. The air smells faintly of candles and herbs, lingering from the previous day's preparations. You move past rows of sisters kneeling on hard wooden floors, their heads bowed, the soft scrape of robes mingling with whispered psalms. You settle into the rhythm, letting your mind float with the words. Every syllable, every breath, becomes part of a meditation. The silence between prayers is as important as the prayers themselves, a canvas upon which your mind can wander, reflect, and sometimes rebel in quiet thought. After matins, you move to the scriptorium. The room is illuminated by morning sunlight, filtering through narrow windows, casting stripes of gold across rough wooden tables. Ink stains the fingers of your hands as you dip the quill into a tiny pot, the scratch of nib on parchment, both soothing and purposeful. Letters curl into precise shapes, words flowing into illuminated letters that will adorn manuscripts. Each page is a prayer in itself, a meditation that occupies both body and mind. You feel the slow, deliberate rhythm of creation, your hand moving carefully, deliberately tracing patterns that will outlast your lifetime. The convent offers small freedoms amidst its strictures. You are allowed to read, to study, to learn, and sometimes to question. The library is a sanctuary, a quiet place where ideas drift in the air, mixing with the smell of parchment and the faint scent of lavender hung to preserve the pages. You trace your fingers along spines, imagining the voices of writers long gone, the worlds captured in ink, waiting to be discovered. Here, intellect finds a way to flourish even when the body is confined, even when vows demand silence and humility. Yet the world outside is never entirely absent. Visitors come, noblewomen seeking advice, patrons delivering donations, messengers bearing news. You see their faces pressed through the grill, curious, expectant, respectful. You respond with careful words, measured gestures, the balance of politeness and devotion, aware of the eyes watching, the judgments waiting. Occasionally, a scandal drifts through the convent like a whisper. A sister caught breaking a vow, an illicit correspondence, a secret act of defiance. The stories ripple quietly, reminding you that human nature persists even under walls of stone and layers of habit. Meals are simple, the taste of bread and broth a constant presence. You sit in silence with other sisters, the scrape of wooden spoons against bowls, the soft clink of utensils, and the occasional sigh filling the room. Food is not indulgence here, it is sustenance, part of the rhythm of discipline. Yet in these small shared moments there is warmth, camaraderie, a quiet understanding of the shared life, the shared commitment. You feel the presence of your sisters around you, their silent strength reinforcing your own. In the afternoons, you walk the cloister, the cool stone underfoot and the faint scent of herbs drifting from the garden. You hear the rustle of leaves, the distant call of birds, the soft murmur of a fountain, and feel the world outside mirrored here in miniature. The garden is tended with care, medicinal herbs, fragrant flowers, and small vegetables for the convent kitchen. You bend to touch the leaves, inhale the scent of thyme and rosemary, and feel a quiet satisfaction in tending life even within walls of stone. These small acts are prayers in motion, expressions of care and devotion, simple yet profound. Education thrives here in unexpected ways. You might study the works of philosophers, practice Latin, copy medical texts, or learn about the stars. Knowledge is treasured, quietly accumulated and passed down with care. You sense the delicate balance between obedience and intellect, devotion and curiosity. Some sisters rise to positions of authority, abbesses whose voices carry weight in spiritual and even political matters. You watch them guide the convent, their decisions weaving together discipline, care, and vision, their presence both protective and commanding. Evenings are filled with chant and prayer, the same rhythms that began your day. You kneel again on cold stone, letting the words settle slowly into your mind. The sound of your voice blending with others, low and steady, creates a resonance that fills the hall. The chant is both grounding and elevating, a meditation that unites body, mind, and spirit. The The shadows stretch along the walls, flickering with candlelight, and you feel the centuries of devotion pressed softly against you, a quiet lineage of faith that carries your own voice forward in time. Yet freedom persists in subtle forms. You notice the small acts of rebellion, a question posed quietly to an abbess, a book read under a blanket after lights are out, a whispered joke shared with a trusted sister. These moments remind you that even within strict walls, human nature finds expression. Curiosity persists and the desire for selfhood remains alive. You feel the tension between obedience and individuality, between confinement and inner liberty, a paradox that defines the cloister as much as silence and prayer. At night, you retreat to your cell. The small room is sparse, a straw mattress, a wooden chest, a crucifix above the bed. You light a single candle and watch the flame dance against the stone walls, casting shifting shadows. You reflect on the day, on the balance of devotion and intellect, silence and thought, discipline and curiosity. You sense the hidden world of the convent stretching out beyond these walls, the lives of sisters who defied expectation in small and quiet ways, the acts of courage and care, woven into daily ritual. You lie down, feeling the cold stone beneath your back, the weight of your habit against your shoulders, the faint scent of herbs and wax lingering in the air. You drift into the rhythm of centuries, the prayers, the chants, the scratches of quills on parchment, the rustle of robes, the distant wind across the cloister garden. You sense that the convent is both cage and sanctuary, a place where devotion confines but also nurtures, where silence both restricts and liberates. You feel the paradox of these walls pressing gently around you, shaping thought and spirit alike. Sleep begins to claim you, slow and steady, as you imagine the lives of the sisters who came before. Their devotion, their intellect, their quiet defiance, and their unspoken sorrows echo through the stone corridors. You sense the continuity of faith, the persistence of thought, the delicate tension between obedience and individuality. In this quiet, gentle world, you feel yourself part of something enduring, a lineage of women whose lives, though often hidden, shaped the spiritual and intellectual landscape of medieval Europe. You walk cautiously through a narrow cobblestone street, the shadows of tall, timbered houses stretching long and sharp in the waning light. The air is damp, carrying the faint scent of smoke, wet earth, and something else. Something that makes the hairs on the back of your neck prickle. You have learned to move quietly, to keep your voice low, for even a word spoken carelessly can carry consequences in a world governed by doctrine. The machinery of orthodoxy watches, always, and you feel its weight pressing invisibly against your chest. You slip through a small alley where a candle flickers behind a shuttered window. Inside, others are gathered, faces partially hidden in the dim glow. Whispers fill the air, hesitant and tense, carrying beliefs that stray from the accepted teachings. You lean closer, catching fragments of conversation, rumors of visions, interpretations of scripture, or practices that the church has deemed dangerous. The thrill of forbidden thought mixes with the fear that it could all be discovered. You sense that knowledge is both a gift and a danger, and that the walls themselves seem to listen. The Inquisition is never far from the mind. Even as you walk the streets by day, there is a persistent awareness, judges, clerics, and informants who pore over words, actions, and behaviors. Questions can be traps. A gesture, a glance, even an expression of doubt can be enough to summon investigation. You imagine the rooms where trials take place, cold stone chambers, the scent of wax and dust thick in the air, wooden benches worn smooth by those who came before, and the faces of those accused, pale and tense under harsh scrutiny. You see the tools of interrogation laid out before you, not for your touch, but in the mind's eye. Ropes, chains, the subtle and the overt, instruments designed to bend the human will without breaking the body entirely. The subtle terror of silence and waiting is as powerful as any instrument. You imagine sitting on a bench in one of these chambers, the echo of your heartbeat loud in your ears, hands clasped in the futile hope of mercy. Every movement, every word is measured against the strict definitions of faith, obedience, and heresy. Some gatherings take place in hidden spaces, cellars beneath homes, woods at the edge of town, the quiet corners of deserted chapels. You imagine a circle of people huddled close, sharing whispered prayers or readings that stray from official texts. The faint scent of candle wax and damp stone fills the air. You feel the tension, the thrill of secrecy, the precarious balance between devotion and danger. Each meeting is fleeting, small and deliberate, a delicate dance with the forces that could condemn you for curiosity or doubt. You hear stories of those who were accused, merchants, scholars, peasants, even clergy, each brought before the machinery of orthodoxy, their lives dissected in minute detail. Some confessed under pressure, others clung to secrecy until the end. The punishments vary: penance, fines, imprisonment, and in some cases death. You feel the shadow of these stories follow you, the sense that knowledge and belief are not only personal, but perilous. You sense the fragility of life, the delicate thread that separates safety from condemnation. In the town square, the public aspect of enforcement becomes clear. Trials are held with crowds gathered, observing, whispering, learning both caution and fear. You imagine the faces in the crowd, curious, frightened, judgmental. Some watch in awe of the spectacle, others in relief that they are not the accused. The air is heavy with anticipation, tension palpable in the uneven breathing of the onlookers. You feel your own pulse quicken, the rhythm of fear as ancient as the stones underfoot. In quieter moments, you reflect on the machinery itself. Inquisitors trained in law and theology, meticulous record keepers, scribes who note every word, every gesture, every pause. You see the intricate bureaucracy that turns suspicion into evidence, belief into trial, rumor into accusation. The process is slow, deliberate, and terrifyingly methodical. You sense the paradox: the Church as protector of faith, yet also as judge, jury, and enforcer of conformity. You feel the weight of centuries pressing against you, as if the walls themselves have absorbed the fear and whispered questions of generations. At night, you retreat to a small room in a friend's home, hidden from prying eyes. The air is damp, the candle flickers, and you listen to the soft murmur of the city beyond the walls. You feel the tension in your shoulders ease slightly, though awareness remains. Conversations here are careful, words chosen with precision, gestures minimized. You feel the delicate balance of human thought under surveillance, the way curiosity and devotion coexist with fear and secrecy. Even here, safety is fleeting, fragile, and precious. You imagine the moments before a trial. The accused kneels, hands bound, head bowed, the faint smell of wax and stone surrounding them. The inquisitor enters, robes heavy with ritual, eyes sharp with intent. Questions are asked, carefully phrased, designed to reveal, provoke, and dissect. You imagine the mental strain, the careful consideration of every answer, the tension between truth, fear, and survival. The air itself seems thick, heavy with expectation, the scent of candle smoke and damp stone mingling with the faint tang of human anxiety. Whispers of heresy spread through communities quietly. A neighbor's comment, a misinterpreted gesture, or a rumor overheard can be enough to bring investigation. You sense the fragility of trust in this world, the weight of silence, the burden of discretion. Even mundane acts are scrutinized. The boundaries between right thought and forbidden belief are narrow and shifting. You feel the same caution as you move through the town, aware that your own steps, your own words, could carry consequences. Despite the fear, human curiosity and devotion persist. Small acts of rebellion, quiet questions, and personal interpretations continue, a subtle defiance that cannot be extinguished. You feel the tension between constraint and freedom, between obedience and individuality, as palpable as the cold stone beneath your feet. Faith persists, but it is nuanced, layered with fear, hope, doubt, and courage. You sense the delicate interplay of all these forces and the quiet heroism of those who navigate them, one careful step at a time. Finally, as night deepens and candles gutter low, you find a quiet corner to rest. The muffled sounds of the city outside, footsteps, distant voices, the rustle of leaves, mix with the echo of whispered prayers and hidden discussions. You feel the weight of the day's reflections, the persistent tension between devotion and doubt, obedience and curiosity, fear and hope. The machinery of the Inquisition is never far, yet so too is the quiet persistence of human thought, resilient and enduring. You drift towards sleep. The rhythm of whispered prayers and hushed conversations, the soft flicker of candlelight, and the faint scent of smoke and stone carrying you slowly into dreams. In these quiet moments, you sense the paradox of faith under scrutiny, the fragility of human thought, the resilience of curiosity, and the strange, persistent courage required to navigate a world where every belief carries both meaning and risk. And in that slow, steady drift, you understand that the shadow of heresy and trial shape not only the lives of the accused, but the thoughts and hearts of all who lived in the world they left behind. You find yourself walking along a narrow cobblestone lane, the evening fog curling around your ankles. Lanterns sway gently from wrought iron brackets, casting a golden glow that flickers across the damp stones. Somewhere ahead, a small chapel bell tolls, soft and irregular, and you feel the world narrowing as if the ordinary is slipping away. Tonight, your focus is on those who dared to peer beyond, to claim visions, to speak words that unsettled the ordinary mind, the mystics, prophets, and strange seers of the medieval world. You enter a small gathering hidden behind the chapel, a space warmed faintly by candles and hearth. The air is thick with the scent of herbs, sage, rosemary, and something more elusive, almost metallic, that hints at fear or awe. The congregation is hushed, eyes wide, watching a figure who rocks gently, murmuring in tones that twist and bend, rising and falling in patterns that make no sense to ordinary ears. You realize that this is the prophet, one whose words claim to come not from study, not from learned texts, but from visions that pierce the veil between the mortal and the divine. You feel the pull of the crowd around you, some entranced, others skeptical. You lean forward, drawn into the rhythm of the murmured chant, the strange cadence of a voice that seems both human and otherworldly. The prophet raises their hands, eyes unfocused, speaking of omens, of stars that will fall, of kingdoms that will crumble, of plagues and storms yet to come. You feel a chill, not entirely from the evening air, as if the very world is holding its breath. Outside, the wind moves through narrow streets, stirring loose stones and echoes of your footsteps. The mystic's voice follows you in memory, repeating phrases that are half prophecy, half poetry, and entirely unnerving. You think of townspeople who have traveled from miles away, drawn by the promise of insight, of revelation, of understanding of the future. They come seeking certainty in a world full of uncertainty, a glimpse beyond the fragile boundary between life and death. sin and salvation. The Church observes quietly and carefully, its presence both protective and suspicious. Some mystics are embraced, others condemned. You imagine the tension in the cloisters and cathedrals, the debates among monks and priests. Are these visions divine or deluded, inspired or dangerous? You sense the subtle fear. Words spoken too boldly, visions too vivid, could destabilize communities, challenge authority, or inspire rebellion. You feel the precarious balance, a line walked by the mystic that can be both holy and hazardous. You wander to a field at dusk, imagining a mystic wandering here centuries ago. They kneel in the grass, arms outstretched toward a blood-red sunset, murmuring names, dates, and signs of events yet to unfold. Their skin is streaked with dust and sweat, their voice cracked from hours of chanting. The animals nearby, birds and small mammals, seem to sense the intensity, holding still or retreating into shadow. You feel the electricity in the air, a pulse that is not wind nor warmth, but something older, something that bends perception and expectation. Some of these figures were women cloaked in mystery, veiled and silent except for the revelations that poured forth. You imagine them in modest cells, praying alone by candlelight, visions dancing behind closed eyelids, shaking their bodies with the intensity of unseen messages. They write in secret, drawing symbols, diagrams, and letters that only a select few may decipher. The ink still smells faintly of iron and water, the letters curling like whispers into the parchment, fragile and powerful. You think of the stories that spread through villages like smoke, a child born with eyes that seem to see beyond, a man claiming to hear angels in the forest, a woman predicting harvests and plagues with unnerving accuracy. You see the faces of villagers, some hopeful, some fearful, some mesmerized, each interpreting the visions through their own lens. You feel the mixture of fascination and dread, the way ordinary life is disrupted by glimpses of the extraordinary. At night, you sit by a flickering hearth, imagining a prophet alone in the cold. The wind rattles the shutters, shadows stretch across the walls, and the fire casts their face in sharp relief. They whisper prayers to God, beseeching guidance, questioning, pleading, describing visions that only they can fully see. You sense the intensity, the devotion, the isolation that accompanies such experiences. There is both reverence and terror, a deep understanding that the world may never believe what you have seen, yet your duty compels you to speak. You step back into a market square, imagining the reception these mystics faced. Crowds gather, some eager to pay homage, others wary, a few ready to accuse of falsehood or witchcraft. Coins and small gifts are offered, words of thanks murmured, questions posed, and sometimes challenges thrown. You feel the precariousness of existence in this space. Acclaim and danger lie side by side. The same breath that carries adoration can bring condemnation. You notice the delicate artistry of perception. Gestures, tone, and timing are as important as vision itself. You trace your fingers along worn wooden posts, imagining a prophet leaving messages for those brave enough to seek them. Tiny scratches, symbols, or folded notes hidden in church walls or beneath stone floors. You feel the thrill of secrecy, the intimacy of knowledge passed hand to hand, heart to heart. Each fragment carries weight, a piece of insight that may guide, warn, or comfort, a tether between mortal life and whatever lies beyond. As night deepens, you imagine the mystic retreating to solitude, the candle guttering low, the wind softening outside. Their visions remain vivid, shifting, alive, dancing on the edge of consciousness. You feel the persistence of human fascination, the way society clings to glimpses of what cannot be controlled, cannot be fully understood, and cannot be ignored. The mystics may unsettle the church, but they also illuminate the imagination, draw out curiosity, and spark the hope that there is more beyond the visible world. You lie down on a straw mattress in a quiet room, the faint hum of distant prayers or nocturnal animals a gentle backdrop. You close your eyes and imagine the flicker of candlelight across parchment, the strange words uttered in the dark, the visions that have drawn followers for centuries. You feel the thrill of the unknown, the tension between awe and fear, devotion and doubt. The world seems larger and smaller at once, filled with ordinary life, yet infused with the extraordinary, waiting for those bold enough to look beyond. Sleep begins to claim you slowly, pulling you toward dreams that echo the visions you imagined. Flickering lights, whispered voices, strange patterns and sudden insights. You sense the persistent pull of the mystic's world, the human need to seek meaning beyond the mundane, and the way those who claim visions, who speak forbidden truths, or predict the unthinkable shape not only belief, but the imagination of generations. In that quiet drift, you feel connected to centuries of awe and wonder, to those who lived at the edge of what was accepted, and to the delicate tension between revelation and fear that defined their lives. You step onto the uneven cobblestones of a town square, the morning mist curling around your ankles. In the distance, a spire rises, piercing the low-hanging clouds. Its shadow stretches across the streets, and you feel the weight of it before you even draw near. This is a cathedral, and not merely a building. It is a sermon carved from stone, a story told in light and shadow, a monument to faith that reaches both upward to the heavens and inward into the soul. As you approach, the smell of wet stone mingles with faint traces of incense drifting from open doors. The air is cool and carries the faint tang of lime and mortar. You feel your footsteps echo on the pavement, a hollow accompaniment to the distant clang of a bell. The cathedral dominates the square, every flying buttress, every carved gargoyle a deliberate choice, each whispering messages of devotion, fear, and aspiration. You sense that every piece of stone was placed with intention, each figure a reminder of both divine glory and human effort. You step inside and the air changes. It is cooler, heavier, still thick with the scent of centuries, wax, dust, smoke, and candle soot. Light streams through stained glass, fractured into thousands of colors, painting the stone floor with reds, blues, and golds. You follow the beams as they stretch across carved pews and altars, and you feel the quiet grandeur press around you, a gentle insistence that faith is both intimate and immense. You notice how the space itself instructs. Pointed arches lift the eyes upward, columns divide and guide, and the nave stretches like a slow breath into eternity. Every carving has meaning. You brush your fingers along the cold stone of a pillar, tracing the relief of angels, saints, and mythical beasts. You imagine the hands that shaped them, rough from chisels, calloused from years of labor. You feel the patient rhythm of construction, each stroke deliberate, each block carefully fitted, each figure a meditation. The cathedral is not merely seen, it is experienced, touched, and felt as much as admired. You wander through the aisles, listening to the quiet sounds, footsteps echoing, a distant cough, the soft flutter of a bird caught inside. You feel the centuries layered in the air, the prayers of countless faithful pressing softly into your skin, mingling with the dust and the stone. You imagine the architects pacing the site, scrolls in hand, eyes tracing lines and angles, balancing ambition with the limitations of timber and masonry. Every decision demanded foresight, patience, and faith in the unseen. The labor was immense. You picture masons, carpenters, and laborers hauling stones from distant quarries, their hands bleeding, backs bent, faces streaked with sweat and dust. You feel the rhythm of their toil, hammer striking chisel, rope pulling block, wheel turning mill, every movement contributing to something that would outlast their lifetimes. The cathedral is as much a monument to human effort as to divine glory, and you sense the pride, exhaustion, and quiet devotion infused into every corner. Money flowed alongside labor, and you sense the subtle power dynamics at play. Wealthy patrons donated gold, land, or labor in exchange for spiritual favor, memorial plaques, and a place in history. Bishops and clergy directed resources with careful precision, balancing ambition, piety, and politics. You imagine the negotiations, the letters, the careful accounting of stones, hours, and coins. Every inch of wall tells a story of devotion and negotiation, of faith expressed through both sacrifice and calculation. You stop before a stained glass window, tracing the intricate scenes of saints, martyrs, and biblical stories. Light passes through the colored glass, fracturing into shapes that dance across the stone. You feel the patient hands of glassmakers at work, cutting and fitting each piece, leading each pane with care, and painting in silver and enamel. You imagine the quiet meditation involved, the rhythm of creation echoing the rhythm of prayer. Each window is a luminous narrative meant to instruct, inspire, and elevate, translating faith into color and light. The cathedral is a stage for ritual as much as art. You hear faint echoes of Gregorian chant, imagining voices filling the vast nave, vibrating through the stone and under your feet. You feel the slow cadence of liturgy, the measured gestures, the incense curling upward, the light shifting as the sun moves across the sky. Everything is orchestrated. Light, sound, scent, and structure converge to create a sensory experience that carries both awe and reflection. You sense how every visitor is guided, consciously or not, through a narrative of devotion and human ambition. You walk past chapels tucked into side aisles, smaller and intimate compared to the soaring nave. Here, devotion is closer, more tactile. Candles flicker, worn pews invite kneeling, and altars hold small offerings. You sense that these corners of the cathedral are personal spaces within a grand, monumental whole. You feel the duality of the cathedral as both a public declaration of faith and a private sanctuary for individual contemplation. Outside, the square has grown warmer under the sun, and you notice the craftsmen continuing their work. Masons repairing worn stone, carpenters maintaining doors and scaffolding, apprentices learning the trade from seasoned hands. You sense continuity across generations, the slow accumulation of knowledge, skill, and devotion. Every chisel mark and careful placement echoes centuries of labor, belief, and ambition, a conversation between those who built, those who worshipped, and those who will come after. At dusk, you return inside. Candles are lit, casting flickering shadows on the walls and vaults. The air smells of wax and smoke, mingling with stone and history. You feel the stillness press gently, the cathedral embracing you in quiet majesty. You follow the columns with your eyes up to the vaulted ceilings, tracing ribbed arches that stretch toward the heavens. Every detail seems deliberate, every element a guide, a lesson, a prayer made manifest in stone. You find a quiet corner to sit, the cool stone floor pressing against your hands as you lean back. You close your eyes and listen, the faint murmur of prayers, the soft scrape of sandals, the rustle of wind through open doors. You feel the cathedral not just as a building, but as a living entity, a repository of faith, ambition, labor, and human hope. Its presence lingers in your bones, a slow, steady reminder that devotion can be expressed in form, sound, and light as much as in words or thought. As night falls, you imagine the cathedral illuminated by torchlight, the spires piercing the dark sky, shadows playing across carved stone, and flying buttresses. You sense the centuries of devotion, the prayers and labor poured into every inch, the ambitions and sacrifices of countless hands. You lie down on a straw mattress somewhere in the town, the distant bell tolling softly, and imagine yourself walking once more beneath the arches, feeling the weight and the wonder, the human and the divine, intertwined. Sleep begins to claim you, slow and steady, carried on the rhythm of stone, glass, and light. You feel the quiet endurance of human ambition and devotion, the careful planning and patient labor, the echoes of prayers rising through the centuries. In this gentle drift you sense that cathedrals are not merely structures but living sermons, lessons in faith, patience, and artistry, monuments that carry the human spirit upward and beyond, from the weight of stone to the vastness of sky. You walk slowly along a quiet corridor, the faint scent of waxed stone lingering in the air. The walls are lined with shelves of ancient books, their spines faded and worn, pages fragile to the touch. You run your fingers lightly over the bindings, feeling the imprint of countless hands that came before. Monks and nuns who copied texts in dim candlelight, their eyes strained, their devotion absolute. You feel the weight of time here, a silent witness to centuries of study, prayer, and quiet labor. You pause to listen. The air is filled with echoes, soft and subtle, the scratching of quills, the low murmur of prayer, the faint chant carried across vaulted ceilings. You can almost hear the rhythm of the scriptorium, the careful cadence of labor and devotion, each stroke of ink a meditation, each breath a prayer. You imagine the dim light flickering against the walls, illuminating a hand that pauses then resumes, committed to preserving knowledge that would outlast empires, wars, and generations. As you move along, you pass a small wooden lectern worn smooth by repeated use. You imagine sitting here centuries ago reading passages from philosophy, scripture, or medicine. The air carries the faint scent of herbs once ground for remedies, and you can picture the meticulous preparation that transformed plants into healing concoctions. Every motion, every small ritual was both practical and sacred, a reflection of a world where knowledge and devotion were inseparable. You step into a chapel where sunlight streams through narrow stained glass windows, fracturing into colors that dance across stone floors. You let your eyes follow the patterns of light, the intricate designs that seem both deliberate and infinite. The monks who created these works did so slowly, deliberately, as though every brushstroke and every curve was a prayer made visible. You feel the quiet patience embedded in the stone and glass, a reminder that art, devotion, and human endurance are intertwined in ways both subtle and profound. You imagine the music that once filled these halls, Gregorian chant rising and falling like a gentle tide. You feel it in your chest, low and resonant, vibrating with the rhythm of breath, of prayer, of life lived in measured devotion. The songs were more than melody. They were a discipline, a meditation, a way to unite body, mind, and spirit in a shared act of worship. Even now, long after the voices have faded, you sense the echo of harmony lingering in the air, faint but persistent, as if the walls themselves remember. Walking further, you pass small rooms where students once studied, copying texts or practicing rudimentary sciences. You sense the curiosity that drove their hands, the desire to understand the natural world, to heal the sick, and to record the wisdom of the ancients. Hospitals and universities that exist today are faint echoes of this meticulous care, these spaces where observation, thought, and faith met. You feel the continuity of human endeavor, the quiet persistence of knowledge transmitted across centuries. You wander into the garden, the soft earth yielding beneath your feet. the scent of herbs and flowers mingling with the cool morning air. You imagine the monks tending these plants, their fingers careful as they harvested thyme, rosemary, or sage. Each leaf, each root, a small act of service, practical, sacred, and deliberate. You feel the patience of hands worn by labor, the care infused into even the smallest task. The garden is a sanctuary, a quiet reflection of the world outside, a space where growth, healing, and devotion converge. The sun rises higher, spilling light across the courtyard. You see the architecture of the cloisters, arches framing walkways, stone columns forming quiet corridors of reflection. You pause, letting your hand trace the curve of a carved capital. The intricate details are testament to skill, devotion, and time. You feel the lineage of hands that shaped this space, the shared vision of generations who understood that beauty and utility could serve both God and community. You notice the subtle discipline that permeates every corner. The orderliness of the library, the cadence of prayers, the measured pace of work. These are echoes of a life structured by faith and routine. Even today, you recognize the influence in the quiet order of a library, the schedule of a hospital ward, the careful rhythm of academic study. The legacy is not only in knowledge preserved, but in the principles that guided its preservation: patience, attention, care, and reverence for both the practical and the sublime. You stop by a simple wooden door, imagining the hidden stories behind it. Perhaps a nun composing music, a monk recording astronomical observations, a scholar copying a medicinal recipe. You feel the intimacy of these private acts of devotion, the small rebellions of curiosity, and the quiet courage of those who balanced obedience with inquiry. Each story is a thread in the fabric of human history, woven with care and subtlety, often unnoticed, yet enduring. You move to the chapel again, noticing the flicker of candlelight against stone walls. You hear in your mind the faint chant, the whisper of pages turning, the rhythm of footsteps across stone floors. You feel the lives of countless individuals pressing softly against your consciousness, their devotion and labor a silent legacy. Each act, no matter how small, carried forward ideas, traditions, and practices that shaped not only medieval life, but the foundations of our modern institutions. The shadows lengthen as evening approaches. You imagine the final prayers of the day, the soft murmur of voices rising and falling, blending with the scent of smoke and wax. You feel the stillness, the sense that every stone, every book, every echo carries meaning beyond its immediate use. Knowledge, devotion, and creativity converge in these quiet spaces, leaving traces that extend far beyond the walls of any single monastery. You pause at the threshold of the cloister, the last rays of sun casting long shadows across the courtyard. You sense the rhythm of centuries, the accumulation of thought, the persistence of learning, the endurance of care. Music, manuscripts, gardens, hospitals, and universities all bear traces of this hidden, quiet labor. You feel the delicate interplay of time, devotion, and human effort, and the subtle ways in which they shape the world even now. Night falls, and the cathedral bells toll softly in the distance. You lie down on a simple bed, the faint scent of stone and candle smoke mingling in the air. You close your eyes and imagine the rhythm of life in these walls. The slow copying of texts, the careful tending of gardens, the precise notes of a chant, the quiet labor of hands devoted to something greater than themselves. You feel the echo of that devotion ripple through time, touching your own awareness, carrying forward a sense of patience, order, and reverence. Sleep comes gently, a slow drift through centuries. You sense the continuity of human effort, the echoes of faith and knowledge, the enduring influence of those who devoted their lives to the careful preservation of thought, art, and discipline. You feel a quiet connection to the past, a sense that even in modern streets, libraries, hospitals, and universities, the legacy of monasteries lives on. And in that gentle rhythm you drift fully into rest, carrying the echoes of centuries with you, soft and persistent, into dreams.